Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel Springboard Thought. Today I'm doing the philosophy of reading tag, 20 questions about how, why you read from Brendan's bookshelf. He was kind enough to do my tag, the book palette tag, so I thought I'd reciprocate because I don't think I've been tagged in this yet unless I missed it, which is possible. So what's most important, a good character, plot, or message? This actually makes more sense now that I know that Brandon is like collating this data and ostensibly like making a spreadsheet of it and stuff like that. So it makes sense why it would be only a few options that you would choose from. For me, I think if there is a good character, most other things are permissible to me. I've read plenty of books where there was no plot, but I enjoyed the character. Or what my ultimate answer, I guess, would be is the voice of the story, though. The authorial voice is the most important. If you can weave a story or a yarn or whatever well, then you're good to go. I don't think you have to conform to any particular thing. But if the character is uninteresting, it doesn't mean it has to be unlikable, but uninteresting, then I think you've got nothing really. Unless it's like a postmodern or meta work or something in which the character specifically doesn't work. So it just depends on the book quite a bit as well. Should one read books about ideas or opinions they disagree with? I think absolutely. I think I think of my reading as a diet, basically, where to be well-rounded, like if you were a kid who was indoctrinated with the food pyramid, I think you need to read a wide range of things, if only to see if they resonate with you, and if something particularly needs to be interacted with in your life. I think reading is a good thing to consume in order to interact with that thing. For instance, alt-right politics, fascism, things like that, in order to combat these notions and specifically understand the arguments and where they come from. And I think the best part of the, world, I guess, to consume these things in a varied way that isn't, I guess, just Googling a whole bunch of different people talking about the same subject would be books. And the nice thing about books is they can be cited. You can see exactly what narrative the person is driving with its citations typically, and consume it for what it is and interact with it in that way. And you can, pick apart the argument, see what works, what doesn't work. But I also think that if you're consuming fiction, you will invariably be consuming things that you don't agree with anyway. There is some people I know that will put aside a book if they find the character unlikable, or there's unlikable aspects of the story, and we're not talking about trauma triggerings and stuff like that. I know some people that will put aside stuff when they don't like a specific thing, and that's perfectly fine. But I think they do that because they have already consumed a thing that they know they dislike, and so do not continue with the thing that will not entertain them, not bring them joy, or whatever. It sours the experience for them. As tech advances, what do you think will be the role of books? I think it will continue to be entertainment and information dissemination. Whether the medium takes a different form, I'm not sure. I could definitely see people speaking the words in a visual medium taking over, like YouTube, people reading books to you. But I think the role of a book will always remain static, hopefully, unless society fundamentally alters and we're, going the path of anti-intellectualism so much so that we change how we relate to books even more. But I think the physical artifact of a book is what it is. Should one ever skim or scan a book? Sure, there's lots of different instances where you would want to do that. A lot of people have mentioned school already, of course. If you are specifically, especially in nonfiction, perhaps you're looking at a collection of essays, some essays won't be pertinent to what you're looking for or using the collection for. You can scan things looking for particular word choices. For instance, just the other day on Goodreads, someone was trying to tell me that I was mad for thinking that in Women Talking, the man was translating the words. He wasn't translating the words, he was transcribing. I opened the book and started scanning for the word transcribe, and on page like 6 or whatever it came up, because he was absolutely translating as he was transcribing. And it's actually like a pretty fundamental component of the book that he translates between the groups of people anyway. So I just find that funny. And so yeah, you can definitely put scanning to use. Should reading always be enjoyable? I think whether you DNF a book or you finish a book, you'll still get a closed feedback loop, which is nice, especially if you're ADHD or are prone to just liking small tasks being completed quite often. So I think to some degree the act of engaging with a book will, no matter what, give you some kind of dividend. Or I don't know why you would even do it, but if you are reading something abhorrent or antithetical to your morals or something like that, I could see that not being entertaining, but you are consuming it for a reason that becomes hopefully enjoyable to you eventually when you are able to put that information to use. So I think to some degree there's always some enjoyment, but whether it's in that current moment or with the actual subject matter or something, in that particular time when it is not enjoyable, who knows? I think most people will read for pleasure though. Is it important to be well read? If we compare it to, the food pyramid or whatever, I think if you want to have a robust and healthy diet, then yeah, you should be consuming more things to be more well-rounded and to know about what you're speaking about. But it depends highly on what you use books for. Some people use it for escapism purely, to be entertainment, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So well-read is a term that I think is fairly meaningless. Some people apply it in a lot of different terms. For instance, I'm well-read in cyberpunk. I'm not well-read on philosophy, for instance, probably. I'm not well-read in Christian fiction or Christian literature in general. I'm not well-read on the Bible. So it depends in which context you are using it. If you mean it to mean an all-encompassing diet of things that you have consumed so that you are fairly knowledgeable about it, like every single thing that you could come across, I think that's more or less impossible. You're not Sherlock Holmes. And most of the time I think it is not applicable, but you could use it to insinuate a specific thing, like saying you're well read in a particular genre that conveys some kind of meaning. What is your book buying process? I get a lot from the library. I just don't make enough money as a working author to be buying so much stuff, though I have bought way more since I have been on BookTube, purely because a lot of what is discussed in Europe, the books are not even here. Like, they will never come here, or the library will not get them, or they're coming out in like a year or something like that here possibly. So if it is available at the library, I get it. If I can't and I really want it, then that's when I try to get it. And if it has to be relatively cheap, I guess. I'm pretty frugal necessarily for my budget. Buying online is through Book Outlet. My wish list is wild. It's like hundreds and hundreds of books. And so when those come on, if I have enough to get free shipping and there's some kind of deal, then that's usually what I'll do. I'll get, like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 books or whatever, up to the $35 limit for free shipping, and then go from there. What is your reading process? I don't do anything but read when I read. I completely lose myself in the text, as long as the author is able to provide that, I guess. But even at a intellectual meta level, when I'm consuming something, say academic, I still am not feeling like I'm present. Like all of my faculties are consuming a particular thing. Even with House of Leaves, what I'm reading right now, if I come upon something that needs translation and I use my phone or my computer to Google it and then write it down in the book, I still feel like if someone were to come up and talk to me or something, it would jar me out of whatever that liminal space is. It's like sleepwalking or something, except it's the act of consuming something, I guess. How do you use what you read? I think that everything you consume in culture and everyday life feeds into what I would call defaultism. It provides the default lens from which you are interacting with everything, whether you like it or not. Just like advertising is what I liken it to. Some people think that they are not affected by advertising. They are. You can actively combat it knowing as you're consuming something, but everything provides defaultism. When you think of a movie or a trope or a genre or whatever, all of that comes into the body of work or art or anything you've consumed to create the default position from which you're looking for, which is why when we interact as white people, we inherently have privilege that we're articulating whether we like it or not, right? And the same thing happens with books. Everything that we consume becomes in dialogue with everything we will consume. In some sense, they're bits on the compost heap of your subconscious. So if you could download a book to your brain, would you still read? So if it replicated the process of reading, in which I'm exercising my faculties to comprehend the actual letters and whatnot, then yeah, I guess so. But I don't think the downloading would do it, right? It would just be present in my mind, and then I would still have to consume the knowledge. I suppose I could, like, Control F some information or something if it was just present, assuming that your brain could be like eidetic or something and search out these things. But simply having the information, I don't think is the same thing as it being comprehended. For instance, really high IQ people can perceive way more information, but all they're doing is exercising their motivated thinking or confirmation bias to feed into their defaultism. The thing that they are projecting onto the text is often what they get from it. So, like that, the best example is the smartest guy, Ron, or whatever his name is, America, is a conspiracy theorist, right? Of course he is. He believes in 9/11 conspiracies. He's pretty out there. He's alt-right. He's conservative. And that's his IQ didn't help him there, right? He was able to perceive more information, which confirmed his bias, that's all. It doesn't help you in any way to merely use logic and have the perception of more information at a fundamental level. You still have to exercise comprehension, you still have to exercise critical thought, and you have to decide what the point of view of which you are consuming the information and making use of it still, regardless. So, yeah, I guess it just really depends what this question means. If, like I said, if it's the act of actually consuming the information into my brain, then let's do it. What are your views on rereading a book? I haven't engaged with it too much, but I've seen Scott from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, for instance, talk about recently all the rereads that he did. And I do think it's fascinating. It's an interesting concept where you're coming to something you've already had comprehension of and re-engaging with the text and, shifting your lens or your perspective from the fact that you're changed in some way. So I definitely have books where even when I finished consuming them, I felt them to be middling, but wanted to reread them. Or Most often this occurs with audiobooks in which I consume them and I don't really like the narration, because the narration is essentially the stand-in for the voice of the book. And if they're not very good or they don't speak to me in some way, it can really hamper the book, and it is part of the craft of the audiobook, I think. So I will then try to consume the book physically to see if I can actually grapple with it, or figure out if it is the voice or if it's the narration voicing the voice or whatever. So I think a book is good if it succeeds in what it is attempting to do. If it is an academic text with a thesis, did it prove its thesis? Are the supporting arguments good? Is it rigorous, etc.? If you're reading a story, did the storycraft succeed in telling the story? If it does foreshadowing, did it work properly? If it does a character arc, did it work properly? If it does a plot or multi-point of view, shifts perspective, whatever, the book tells you that it is about and what is it attempting to do. Eventually, did it succeed in those things? And if it does, then I think that's fine. It's a good book, even if it isn't for me. It has succeeded at a craft level. And this can take many forms. Like the prose work is part of the craft. The presentation even, the layout, every single aspect of a book as presented to the consumer as a physical artifact is some measure of craft to me. And so I think as long as the book articulates the thing that it says that it is, on some level it has succeeded. When is a book bad? When it doesn't do that. I think a book is bad also when it has done more than that premise. For instance, if it has injected the views of the author in a way that doesn't make sense for the story. We've all probably experienced something like that where it feels like the author is just putting words into the mouths of the character, or literally just self-inserts or goes on a diatribe or whatever about politics, about whatever. A book is, I think, literally bad if it is actively doing harm in the world as well. Like if it is misinformation, if it is trying to normalize something that is bad, something amoral or something, and a lot of people will be like, well, morals just don't exist. You still have to decide, like I was saying before, what perspective and what values in a judgment you are making onto anything you are consuming. And so the idea that moral relativism would scrub that free does not absolve you of being a good or bad human being, in my opinion. Superman is good, you're doing well, etc. So I think that an object can be actually bad if it is a proponent of harm, which is demonstrable. I don't think I need to go into that. How do you feel about not finishing a book? I'm fine with it. If I don't like the book from the perspective of I cannot engage with it in the manner in which it wants to be engaged, I don't accept the premise, I don't want to read it, I don't feel like I am accepting what it is presenting, I don't rate it and I don't finish it. If I have tried to do that, that's when a rating comes in, and I try to say why, and I try to articulate what it is about the book that I think has failed. Should the author's personal life matter at all? So Steve Donahue did this tag and I commented, and what I think is that if you are critical enough in a book when you are consuming it, you're going to find the author's personal life in the text regardless, and you can judge the text. You know, your reading should be fair of the text, but anyone who generally has a problematic personality, views, morals, whatever, generally it's replicatable or demonstrable in their text. Like they show their whole ass, as the kids say. So I think you can criticize the book by way of that anyway, or criticize the author by way of the book. They have shown you. And I think that authors that do actual harm to people, it matters. There's a few different criterias for evaluating stuff like that. Like, does your opinion eventually matter whatsoever? Are you actually providing allyship to the people that are harmed by that? Are you the one harmed by that? And harm is not conflict, right? So it is a very nuanced thing, I think, that needs to be engaged with, especially as white people, because white people generally will be angry on behalf of people that say they are harmed, and then co-opt that entire interaction and that feeling in order to feel better about themselves without doing any work whatsoever for that community. So if you want to actually help the people that are being harmed, probably as a white person who's consuming a text, you're not harmed. You might be offended, and you might find it offensive, and you might not want to support the author who's alive and working and may need your money or not. In the case of some people, they don't care. They don't need your money. They're billionaires, and they do what they want. And so I think you need to evaluate how many spoons you have, what you can actually reasonably do, what accountability looks like if you're into restorative justice. Again, it's the people that have harmed dictate the terms of which you need to provide them with allyship and support, and whatever it is that they need. They dictate what they need, and you support it. If you could only read one genre for the rest of time, what would it be? I actually hate this because I saw Remembered Reads Jen talking about how memoirs would be the best way to do it, because all of the different people in a memoir who are ostensibly working in whatever field will probably talk about the field that they're working in, so you can learn about absolutely everything. And I don't really love memoirs typically, but I also don't engage with them that much, so maybe I'm just reading the wrong stuff. I definitely read a lot of, or some, celebrity trash memoirs, like Will Smith, a bad book. It does not succeed at what it's doing, and it's propaganda. But so yeah, I think probably memoirs, unfortunately. I want to say literary fiction, but I think lived experience articulating stuff like that would be more valuable in the long run. Do you ever read a book without knowing anything about it? Yes. That is generally ideal for me, actually. I don't even like to read the back matter of a book because it is generally not even an accurate representation of what's happening. Whoever did a summary or a synopsis or whatever is going at it from like a advertising marketing perspective, right? And if it has a whole crap ton of blurbs on it, that just is even worse for me. This book is the next Fight Club. This book is the next, Catcher in the Rye, or whatever, right? Whatever's hot right now, that's what that book is like. So I generally just want to hear people talk about a book and say whether they liked it or not in a concise manner in which they are articulating what they think that book is about and whether or not it succeeds or not. If they are excited about it, generally that can spill over onto me. I'll be excited about it too, and I'll bump it up the TBR or whatever. But generally, all I'm looking for is to have just the right amount of information so that I can engage with it in a silo, basically, and come away with an opinion that feels like it's mine and not part of just the general intellect. What author, genre, series, or culture can you just not get into? Why? Well, Christian fiction, and that's a wide brush to paint, I guess, but it's generally the puritanical stuff or stuff that is propaganda on behalf of the organized religion, and definitely what I've consumed has mostly been Christian. I'm sure any denomination can have things like that, but in my experience, some Christian or peripheral thing of Christianity is most likely to proselytize to me. And I don't like that. I don't even like self-help that feels prescriptive, right? So you just imagine what puritanical text dictating what morality and stuff like that is, when you could literally just read any story as a child and figure out what is generally right and wrong, and then hopefully become a more nuanced person as you grow. What else? Generally, philosophy, alt-right rhetoric, and self-help is a lot of it is just because the right-wing rhetoric that permeates that is often just like a gateway drug for people. They feel like the attachment of being active and engaging in the self-help aspects form an asymmetrical parasocial relationship with the author, and then that often leads to them being indoctrinated or enjoying the motivated thinking of a person who doesn't think other humans are actually human, for instance. Do you think everyone should read, and why? Ideally, yes. I mean, the more marginalized you are in a society, the less actually you have time to read. Some people who don't even have bank accounts have to wait in line to cash their checks, which could be time that they're doing anything else. Maybe they're not even eating lunch because they're trying to do that. So, yeah, we have libraries. Do people have time to use libraries? In a utopian society, I think everybody should read. I think everybody should read for pleasure, and I think everybody should try to interact with things that make them uncomfortable and interrogate the feeling of uncomfortability in them, and see where that's coming from and why. But the reality is much more nuanced, but I don't think that's what this question's answering anyways, or asking anyway. I think everybody should read, yeah. And I think that's it. I would tag people, but I'm fairly certain everybody's done this tag already. So if you're watching this video, you haven't done it, by all means feel tagged by me, and by all means let me know and I'll come watch.